Okay, so once again, my name is Rajat Sidana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT and I'm going to be your co-host today. In this webinar, we'll look at number properties, more specifically on divisibility and remainders, and we'll look at how to apply the core concepts in primes, even, odd, and divisibility on the easiest to the most challenging questions that you could see on the exam. And to make sure that you have that right foundation, we did send the video lessons on primes your way. If you've not gone through these video lessons, please go through them. They are a part of your free trial. Also, we have some upcoming free webinars. Next weekend, we have a free webinar on how to ace GMAT reading comprehension by following some key reading strategies. This webinar is next Saturday, the 9th of March, again 7 a.m. Pacific, which is the same time as is right now. Then we also have a quant workshop, which is, think of it as a proctored mock test in which we evaluate what your current score is or your current ability is, and we also assess your strengths and weaknesses and give you a personalized study plan as to so that you can go from, let's say, a Q42 to a Q49 or a Q44 to a Q50 or a Q46 to a Q51. Supporting me in this webinar, we have Payal Tandon, who's the other co-founder of e-GMAT, also Ashutosh Mishra, who's a subject matter expert, as well as Komal Shah, who's a GMAT strategy expert. This is a free webinar, and to make sure that we do justice to this group as a whole, we ask a few leading questions. One of them is, when do you plan to take the test? The other one is, what is your target GMAT score? If you've not responded to these questions, please do so. All right. It's amazing that about 80% or the number keeps on changing actually, but more than 75% if you're aiming for a score of 730 or higher. That's wonderful. And with regards to when do people have their exam, the biggest group, I think close to a majority, is those who haven't taken their date as of yet. Other than that, we have, I'd say, 3 similarly sized groups and a slightly larger group in those who have their exam between 46 to 75 days. With that, let me go right into the webinar pane. Okay, the screen should have or should be in the process of changing for you. When it does change, you would see the screen that says number properties 2. All right, I think the screen should have changed for you by now. Let me just put in a yes no poll once again. The audio is still loud and clear. As a yes no poll, select yes if the audio is loud and clear, select no otherwise. All right, that's wonderful. It seems pretty much everyone can still hear me clearly. There are essentially 3 parts of this webinar. In the first part, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to e-GMAT. In the second part, we're going to go right into the core of this webinar. Payal would take over and we'll look at solving questions from divisibility and remainders. And then in the last part of the webinar, if you have questions which do not pertain to number properties, because all your number properties related questions should have been answered in the second part of this webinar. If you have questions which are on topics which are other than number properties, and I'll be happy to take those questions in this third part of the webinar. We also call this an open-ended Q&A. So with that, let's go right into an introduction to e-GMAT. So earlier on, I asked this question, what's your target GMAT score? And 75% of you said that you plan to score 730 or higher. Okay, and statistically, if you look at this, I can tell you that only 6% of students get to a score of 720 or higher, and this is despite the fact that median GMAT scores at B schools keep on going up, and this is data from this year. Now, what is it that people who actually get to those scores do? A good percentage of them do use e-GMAT. Why do I say that? When you look at the stats on top forums, which is one is the number of verified reviews, and the second is a number of success stories, what you're going to find is that there have been more verified reviews for e-GMAT than have been for any other prep company over the last 3 years. And similarly, if you look at the number of success stories on GMAT Club Share, GMAT Experience Forum, you're going to find a very similar story. Um, So what makes our students more successful? I think that there's one thing that makes our students more successful, that it is our approach to GMAT preparation. And to understand that approach, what you need to understand is that the architecture of learning that we follow versus the architecture of learning that is followed by other prep companies out there. And to do that, let's understand the two prevalent architectures of learning that exist today. The first one that exists today is a book-based approach. And the second architecture of learning that exists today, or learning architecture that exists today, is what we call as a private tutoring based approach. When you look at most of the other prep companies that offer audiovisual instruction, what you're going to find is that even though they have audiovisual instruction, they have quizzes, their predominant architecture of learning is still that book-based architecture. When you map our learning architecture to either one of these, what you're going to find is e-GMAT's a lot more like a private tutoring based architecture, and to make sure that to understand why one architecture is more effective than the other, let's kind of see the differences in how both these architectures approach your GMAT preparation. So let's see, how do you ace the GMAT? To ace the GMAT, let's say you're someone who's starting at a score of 600, you want to get to that 720 or higher score. The first thing you need to do is to create that path towards your goal, which is you need to have a visibility as to how are you going to reach that 720 or higher score. Then you need to make sure you spend time learning concepts that you don't know. Then learning those concepts isn't enough. You need to know how to apply those concepts as well, and you need to do it so well that you attain that level of mastery so that you are among those top 6 percentile of students. So this is the fundamental path that an efficient study plan or an efficient approach to that 720 score would have. Now let's see how a book-based approach works along this. So starting with study plans, when you start learning from a book, you get a bunch of study plans, and then you may get some guidance as to how they apply to your case, but essentially the decision as to which study plan to choose and how to go about doing that is completely on you. Essentially, there are no personalized study plans that you get in a book-based approach. You may get some, but they're not personalized to you. They don't cater to your individual strengths, your individual weaknesses. Now, you choose a study plan and you start learning concepts. When you do that, what starts to happen really is that you learn a bunch of concepts, but the burden of validation as to whether you've learned that concept well enough is completely on you. Once you learn a few concepts, you go on to applying those concepts. Now, people who follow a book-based approach learn application purely by solving questions. The reason for that is that books are not particularly well suited to teaching you how to apply concepts. They don't, just the very static nature of books is not conducive to telling you what do you do in step 1 when approaching a problem, what do you do in step 2, what do you do in step 3, and how do you modify that step 1 if the variables in the problem change or slightly. And again, so that's one area where books lack quite a bit. Once you've learned a bunch of concepts, try to solve a lot of problems, you then evaluate whether you've attained that level of mastery, whether that you are in that top 6 percentile of students or not. And to do that, a lot of people take mock tests. Now, there are some good mock tests out there, but again, that onus of evaluation is completely on student, and more often than not, students make decisions which are not the most logical, and then they go between one topic to the other. I've seen people study number properties for 3 days, not complete number properties, and then move on to PNC and probability, and then do that for another couple of days, and then move on to sentence correction and so on and so forth. And the reason for that is because they don't know, they don't have that sense of evaluation of mastery. They feel they have evaluated that the master a topic to a certain degree, and they get that urge to move on from one topic to the other. Now, private tutoring based approach works slightly differently, or I would say very differently. When you work with a good private tutor, the first thing that private tutor does is that he or she evaluates your strengths and weaknesses and creates a personalized study plan for you. This study plan is designed to ensure that your likelihood to reaching that target score is the maximum, and the time required to get to that target score, which is 730, 740, 760, is the minimum amongst all the comparative approaches. Then a private tutor teaches you concepts, and while teaching you concepts, he or she evaluates you and gives feedback to you so that you actually learn concepts well. Then a private tutor teaches you how to apply concepts, telling you what you do in step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on and so forth. And while doing that, a private tutor constantly evaluates you against the benchmark that he or she has set for the top 6 percentile of students. And when you hit that benchmark, the private tutor urges you to move on. So while you learn the same content in both these approaches, the extent of personalization, the degree of evaluation and feedback is a lot more in a private tutor based approach, and it's very easy to see why that approach is statistically has been a lot more successful. So let's see why we say that e-GMAT's mapped a lot more on that private tutoring based architecture, whereas most of these other prep companies are on this book based architecture. Let's start with the same case study that we've been going about, which is going from a score of 600 to a 720. The first step in that is to create a study plan. Now we've created this utility called a personalized study planner that you can access on this URL, gmatplanner.com. It's an AI-driven utility that allows you to build your personalized study plan in less than 7 minutes. Let's see how this goes about doing that. So we're talking about a student who starts at a score of 600. So it first takes in your current score, and when it takes in your current score, it also takes in your score split into account. So this particular student has a Q44 and a V28 as his current score with 600. Now, you may look at this as both the scores are 50 percentile, but this utility understands the numbers, the abilities behind these percentiles. It's purely not a quant utility. So Q44, when it comes to ability, is much higher ability than a V28. So it understands that for this particular student, his strength is quant. So while computing the path to the target score, it looks at various variables and really decides the most efficient path to achieving that target score, that 720 score, is by taking quant to 50, and then by making sure that the student improves his or her verbal enough to get to that 720 score. Now again, both of them are 85 percentile, but when you look at the abilities that are possible in quant, you'd find that there's only one higher ability possible in quant, whereas there are a good 11 more abilities possible in verbal. So the utility truly maximized his strength and then made sure that the student worked enough on his weakness. Now, your target quant and verbal scores are a Q50 and a V38. The utility then decides, okay, helps you determine how do you get to that Q50 and how do you get to that V38. And this is again done based on your starting abilities, which is the abilities in Q44 and V28. So to get to a Q50, it helps you determine that, hey, you need to get to an 83 percentile in arithmetic or an 83 percentile in algebra geometry. Similarly, on the verbal side, it helps you decide these percentiles. Now, why is this important? The reason why this is important is when you do this, your GMAT preparation is not a black box in which you're studying, or you're studying number properties for tutors and then moving on to sentence correction and then moving on to geometry. It is a set of 5 neatly defined milestones, and you study number properties or you study sentence correction till you reach that 89 percentile ability in sentence correction. This is a screenshot from the utility. You can really see the starting scores, the starting abilities on the left hand side, and the target scores and the target abilities on the right hand side. And you can really see how the quant abilities are mapped and how the verbal abilities are mapped as well. Now, once you do that, the question then is, how long do you need to study quant? How long do you need to study various topics in verbal? And this utility also provides that information. So here you can really see starting from arithmetic, algebra, sentence correction, critical reasoning, and reading comprehension. You get your starting abilities, you get your target milestones. You also really see how much time you need to spend on each one of these. So it answers the most pressing questions. And if you look at the bottom right hand corner, it also really says, hey, when can you take your test? which is a 9th of May, given the amount of time that you spend every day. Now, if you spend more time per day studying, you can definitely move this date closer to sometime in April overall. And again, it assumes when are you starting. When you do this, you know when you're studying sentence correction, you need to go from that 50 percentile to 89. When you're studying critical reasoning, you need to really go from this particular starting level to this particular ending level. Now, people also want to know when do they need to study what, and that's where it also provides a calendar view where it gives you that sequence of studying which you see over here. It takes into account how many hours you put in every day on the weekday as well as on the weekend, takes into account your start dates, and it tells you what do you need to study when, as you can really see in this calendar view. And this view is saved on your e-GMAT account. You can come back and look at this again and again and again and make edits to it. So when you think about it, for those of you who actually worked with a private tutor, I don't think even private tutor would give you this granularity of or this clarity overall. The reason why we built this utility, and it has three neural networks running in it, it has an AI engine running, and the reason we spend 1,000 hours doing this is so that you guys can, each one of you can get a personalized study plan in 7 minutes or fewer. You don't need to work with a private tutor to do that. Once you have that clarity towards, okay, how are you going to get to that 720 score, the next step is learning concepts. Remember, a private tutor teaches you concepts and then gives you feedback on how well you've learned. The e-GMAT learning platform is designed according to this architecture. We teach you concepts, and when we teach you concepts, we actually evaluate you right then and there and give you feedback overall. You can really see the divisibility concepts, the remainders concept over there. When you look at another popular course, it's by Magoosh, what you really find is it reads a lot more like a book. You have video lessons, and we're going to really see how these lessons look inside to really see the difference. This is again on the next slide what you're going to really see the e-GMAT course, and you can really see the structure over there. You learn a concept, then you learn how to apply that concept, and then you have practice questions right over here. You can see the practice questions over here. Again, the goal really is to give feedback to you right then and there. Also, what you really see is it's beautifully audio-visual. There are animations on this, so that your focus is on the right thing at the right time. This is a comparative concept from Magoosh course, and what you really see is it's audio-visual. Yes, there's visuals, there's audio, but it essentially is fairly verbose. It reads like a book that speaks. The next thing is application of concepts, and again, remember, it's really important to, once you learn concepts, it's really important to learn how to apply those concepts. When you see a problem, what do you do in step 1, step 2, and step 3, and as Spiral takes over, we're going to talk about that particular application and divisibility and remainders. At e-GMAT, we've built these specific files that help you do this. Then we have practice quizzes right after these files where you see these over here, in which we evaluate your application, and then we also give you specific questions from official guide where you can evaluate your ability to apply these concepts. And this is how every module in Quant or Verbal is structured. And this is the learning architecture. We also have another evaluation module which is completely separate. By comparison, when you look at the Magoosh course, what you find is it's a bunch of video lessons, and then there's one quiz towards the end. There is no feedback, there are no scores given to you. Again, the intent over there is not to give you feedback, but the intent is essentially to give you pure practice. And the reason why this is important is because you're not studying algebra or arithmetic to just learn the concepts. You're studying that to hit a particular ability level. If you hit that ability level, you know you're going to get to that target score. The last piece which is there is to really say, hey, I've studied number properties, I've studied geometry, I need to figure out whether I've reached that ability level or not, that I can go on from one section to the other. And to do that, we built this tool called Scholaranium, which has this quiz called Ability Quiz. In Scholaranium, you can take an algebra ability quiz or an arithmetic ability quiz or a number properties ability quiz, and we'll tell you how well you're doing in various parts. So in this case, this particular student is doing really well in these two aspects of it, but in inequalities and functions, he or she needs to do slightly better to get to that 73 percentile or 83 percentile level. So while you learn the same content in each of these approaches, the extent of application, the extent of personalization, the extent of clarity that you get is a lot more in a private tutoring based approach. And you can really see how we mapped our learning architecture to that of a private tutoring based approach. Now, who's built this? Some of GMAT Club's top rated instructors have built this platform. Instructors have been reviewed a lot more frequently on GMAT Club, and in fact, you can go on to this URL, which is over here, and look at read the reviews of those instructors. So while only 6% of the people score 720 or higher, a good number of them do use e-GMAT. We are starting our batch, or we did start our batch yesterday, which is a March batch. And this is what a batch calendar looks like. You can also download the batch calendars for our quant verbal. This is what we call as a GMAT Live Prep batch calendar. If you want to stay updated with all things e-GMAT, and if you want to connect with students at top B schools, you're welcome to connect with me on my LinkedIn. I have upwards of 10,000 students connected with me on my LinkedIn. And essentially, we also post about 4 to 5 articles every week. So yeah, I think it'll be a great way for you to stay updated with everything that's going on in the MBA world. With that, I have come to the end of my intro. I'll now invite Payal to take over and start the second part of this webinar.
Good morning, good evening, and hello everyone. My name is Payal Tandon and I will be your host for this second part of the webinar wherein we'll talk about how to ace quant. Let's just make sure that you all can hear me clearly. So if you can please press yes, if you can hear me clearly, that would be wonderful. All right, sounds good. Okay. All right, so what is the purpose of this session? What I want to make sure is that after about 1.5 hours, you have a very, very clear idea about what is the main thing that you need to do in order to ace GMAT Quant. Now, I want to ask one question to all of you. How many of you feel that you are relatively strong in quant? And I'm using the word relatively because again, I want you to compare your strength in quant versus your strength in verbal. So how many of you feel that quant is your strength? Because ultimately your GMAT score is a combination of your quant and verbal score. What you are looking for is the final GMAT score. So if quant is your strength, then you definitely need to capitalize on that strength. And from the information that you have, from the choice that you've selected, it appears that 80% of the class believes that quant is the strength. So it absolutely is very, very critical that you need to utilize this as your strength and capitalize on it. And that's what we're going to do in this session, because I want to make sure that you understand how to capitalize on quant as your strength. Okay. So the first thing that I want you to understand is you need to have a sound understanding of basics. Now, a number of you would know what the typical concepts that are tested on GMAT are, but there is that level of understanding which is right on the surface, and then there's a level of understanding which you need to have, which requires you to go into the depth of that concept. And that's what we're going to be discussing in this session. The kind of examples that I'm going to be taking on are based on one single concept, which is divisibility and remainders. It's one of the very important concepts that are tested, that is tested on number properties in the GMAT exam. So we'll be taking as an example divisibility and remainder concepts, and we'll be going through to what level of detail you need to understand that concept in order to be able to solve questions which are of higher difficulty level, because ultimately if you have to utilize quant as your strength, it means that you should have that ability to solve as many difficult questions correct as possible. Okay. Now, the second thing that I want to make sure that you understand is that you absolutely need to have a structured approach to solving questions. I know many of us over here feel that, okay, I know quant really well. So as long as I can practice a few questions, just brush up on my concepts, I should be good. I need to make sure that I spend as much time on verbal as possible. How many of you feel that way? That quant is anyway my strength, so I'll just brush up on my concepts, but my majority of my time that I spend on GMAT needs to go on verbal. So about half of the class feels that way. Okay, I'm absolutely fine with that. But the one thing that I want to make sure is that two things. One is that you need to have that solid understanding of concepts. Second is you need to have a process to solve quant questions. I don't want you to rely on tricks. I don't want you to rely on those methods to solve. I want you to have one solid approach that encapsulates all the aspects that the GMAT wants to test you on when it poses a certain question in front of you. Okay, so those are the two main things that I want you to take away from this session. Now, how am I going to do that? This is my typical progression. I start off with some warm-up questions just to get you warmed up with the concepts that we will be taking on in this session. Then I give you some problem solving questions which are 650 to 700 level. Then I slowly increase the difficulty level of problem solving questions and I ask you 700 level questions in problem solving. And then towards the end, I ask you data sufficiency questions which are of 700 level. Now, all of these questions, as I said, we are using divisibility and remainders as the concept. Okay, but whatever I teach you, you are going to be applying, you will be able to apply that across the board to all of quant. We are just using divisibility and remainders as an example concept. Okay. Now in this session, I want to do something differently. I want to give you guys a flavor of the questions that you'll see at the end of this session, which is the difficulty level 700 and DS questions. Okay. So I'll give you questions 8 through 10. I'll ask you to solve those questions. I won't give you the correct answers just yet. Think of this as just a starter. I'm just going to give you these questions so that you get a flavor of what is the what is the end difficulty level that we are trying to accomplish in this session. Okay, and then how we are going to be building up to that. Okay, now after I go through, so once you solve these questions, I'll then start off with the warm up, PS, and then PS 700, and then we'll come on to this section and we'll solve these questions in detail. Okay. All right, so that's what we're going to do right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away this presentation and I'm going to get just the questions only presentation. So click on yes if you're able to see the presentation slide that says GMAT style questions, 700 plus level data sufficiency questions. All right, let's wait for a couple of more seconds for it to stabilize. All right, I think sounds good. Now I'm going to bring about the poll. Now, one thing that I do is I don't like to time anyone in these webinars, because right now what we are focusing on is the approach and the conceptual clarity. So I want you guys to take as much time as you need. But again, as much time as you need is pretty open-ended. So what I do is when half of the class has put in the responses, I give you a 10-second or a 30-second warning depending upon the difficulty level of question. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to be giving you a 30-second warning because these are difficult questions. So if all of you can can click on still solving over here. That way I know how many of the the attendees are actively engaged in this question. That way I'm not waiting on people who are not actively engaged. That would be wonderful. So I have about 120 people in the webinar, so let's get this number to at least 75. All right. It's slowly increasing. That's okay. I'm going to not wait for everyone to select that. Here's your question. Go ahead. All right, last 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. All right, and here comes, let me just write down the data for this one. Okay, I'm going to get you the next question, and take this away. Give me 1 second. Here's your next question. I'm going to get you the poll in just a minute. All right, last 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Here is your last question, question number 10 in this section, and then we'll get into the regular progression. If you can please click on still solving. Okay, let's get a few more responses here. All right, sounds good. And here comes your question number 10. Go ahead. All right, the plus and the VE means positive. All right, last 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so we've solved the most difficult questions in this session. Let me hear from you as to how your experience was in these questions, and I'll bring back the presentation, our main presentation. So just give me 1 second here. All right, so tell me, how was your experience with these questions? Did you truly find them difficult, or you had to guess, it was easy, not completely sure of answers, difficult, impossible to solve on real GMAT? The first one was fine, second was harder, last one was just a guess. Okay. All right. So again, the thing that I want you, my goal was not to make you feel stressed or make you feel that, okay, this is not doable. My goal over here was to tell you that these are the kind of questions that you will need to solve if you are to score in that 90 percentile or 95 percentile level on quant, and quant is your strength, so you definitely need to capitalize on that. Okay, now you've solved these questions right now, and I can tell that the accuracy for these questions was not really that good. The first question, the accuracy, only 22% of the class got it correct. Second question, 30% of the class got correct. And the third question, about 30% of the class got correct. So the accuracy was really poor. But I don't want you to get disheartened. What we're going to do now is, we're going to start from the very basics so that you get an idea about what is the level of confidence that you need to have for the concepts that these questions tested you on. Okay, that's the first thing that we're going to do. And then we're going to slowly increase the difficulty level of the conceptual application. Okay, so that you understand how is it that you need to apply the concepts that you're learning. And then I'm going to give you another chance at these 3 questions, and I guarantee that the accuracy for these questions will improve. Your performance on these questions will definitely improve. Okay, even if it doesn't improve, because again, 1 hour long session, it may not be as effective in order to, it will, may not be able to get to the may not be able to get you to that level. But once I go through the solution, you will be able to see how just having that clarity of concept and having a structured approach can help you solve such difficult questions. Okay, is that clear? Is the goal of this webinar now clear? Yes, no? All right, good. No one is disheartened, right? Yes or no? I don't want anyone to feel, oh my goodness, I wasn't able to do this. So get that out of your mind. You will be able to do it. That's my promise to you. Okay, if I can do it, you can do it too. All right, so let's get started with the warm-up section now. All right, so basic questions on divisibility and remainders, just to get your feet wet with the conceptual knowledge. I'll give you some feedback on where you lie in your conceptual knowledge. Again, I'm not going to be discussing the solutions in excruciating detail, but I will definitely give you pointers as to how you can utilize the e-GMAT course to build your foundation in these concepts. Okay, so here's your first question, and I'm going to get you the poll. Let's solve these questions, and these are easy questions. You should be able to solve them without any problems. But even if you face any problems, we'll go through the solution and give you feedback. There you go. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So almost everyone got this question correct, barring a few people, and I believe once they also review the solution, they will be able to understand where they faltered. What's the check for divisibility by 3? Sum of all digits should be divisible by 3. Now what we are given over here is we are simply given the number, the 3-digit number, and we've been given that the digits are consecutive numbers. So all we do is we assume that the first digit is x, which means the second digit is going to be x plus 1, third digit is going to be x plus 2. We take the sum of the digits and we get x plus 1 plus x plus 2. We simplify that, we get 3x plus 3, and we can easily take 3 as common, x plus 1. So essentially, whatever be the value of x, this number is always going to be divisible by 3 because it has a 3 as a factor here. Okay, so straightforward question. It's not maybe divisible, it's always divisible by 3. Okay, so any doubts about this question? Yes, no? Want to make sure that your concepts are airtight. Good, very nice. Let's move forward to the next question now. Here's the next question. We've changed the question slightly. It is a 4-digit number. Now, can you all please click on still solving? I apologize, I didn't ask you to do that for that previous one. All right. Go ahead. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Last 10 seconds. All right. So this is where things get a bit more interesting. This is not, there was certain more processing that was required in this question as compared to the previous question, and that's where I see that some of you have faltered. The correct answer here is choice A. Z may be divisible by 4. So let's figure out why you faltered in this question. So for those of you who selected any choice other than choice A, I would recommend that you post your responses a whole lot more over here when I ask you these questions. So tell me, what is the divisibility rule for divisibility by 4? Last two digits should be divisible by 4. Absolutely right. Now, what have we been given? What we've been given is that whose digits are consecutive numbers. Now, how are you going to be processing this information? If digits are consecutive numbers, then okay, so if last two digits need to be divisible by 4, then what other information do you need? What could be the possibilities for the last two digits in a number Z? Is it possible to have even number? Yes or no? Is it possible for Z to be even? Yes or no? Yes, it is. How about odd? Is it possible for Z to be odd? Yes, it is possible for Z to be odd, right? We are talking about Z as a number. Okay, Z is a 4-digit number whose digits are consecutive numbers, right? That's all we know about Z. Now, Z can be either even or odd. Now, let's take a look at when Z is odd. If Z is odd, a number could be 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Because 4 and 5 are consecutive numbers, right? In this case, is Z divisible by 4? No, it's not divisible by 4, right? Now, let's take the case of even. If Z is even, then also there are two options that we have. Last two digits may be divisible by 4. For example, 3, 4, 5, 6. In this case, 5 and 6 are divisible. 56 is divisible by 4, right? Now, the last two digits may not be divisible by 4. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. 34 is not divisible by 4. So really speaking, in this case, Z is not divisible by 4. In this case, Z is divisible by 4. In this case, Z is not divisible by 4. So the correct answer here is choice A, that Z may be divisible by 4. For those of you who selected choice C, you didn't consider all the three possible cases. Okay, so the output that I want you guys to take away from this question is your approach. Okay, that's the feedback that I want you guys to take away from this question. All of you knew the conceptual understanding here, divisibility rule of 4. So there is nothing wrong with your conceptual understanding. But what was lacking here was, what was missing here was, how do you take that conceptual knowledge and answer the question that is given? And that's where the approach comes about. Okay, you had to consider, okay, if Z is a 4-digit number that's given to me, okay, what are the options that I have? Z could be odd, Z could be even. Now, those are the two options that I get from Z is a 4-digit number. Then the next thing is the digits are consecutive numbers. Now, are there multiple cases that I need to consider with even? Definitely yes, given the divisibility rule that I have. The last two digits should be divisible by 4. Now, not all consecutive numbers with the last two digits would basically would be divisible by 4. So you have to come up with those cases. Okay, and you need to make sure that that your analysis includes all of those cases so that you are not left behind answering a question incorrectly. Okay, is this point clear? Yes or no? Okay, good. So we have one learning from approach standpoint, that you need to be able to consider all the cases that are given. Always start from the given information in the question and then build up your cases based on your understanding of the concepts. But from concept perspective, you guys are okay. Okay, from this concept perspective. All right, so now let's move on to our next warm-up question. here, and I'm going to remove the, let me change the poll here. Can you please click on still solving? All right, here you go. Last 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to broadcast the results now. Really good. About 77% of the class got this question correct, 78% to be exact. Divisibility rule of 8, last three digits should be divisible. So you take up the number, you see 897, and you divide that by 8, you get the remainder 1. Now the closest number will be the one that you subtract 1 from the number, and you get the closest number as 896, and all of you, a majority of you did it that way. So for those of you who selected choice C as the correct answer, was this the approach that you followed, the approach that you see on the screen? Okay, I see some no's over here. Use last two digits. Okay, if you use last two digits, then that's not correct. You need to use last three digits. Now, in this case, it doesn't really matter much because 8 is anyway divisible by 8. So 97 would have given you the same answer. But again, that may not be the case all the time, right? Used elimination. Again, guys, it's okay for you to use elimination, but then you end up spending a lot of time in calculations. Okay, so I would rather you not do that. Okay, it's important for you to make sure that you apply the sound conceptual understanding that you have. You start from the given information and then you get to your answer, because as you build up this conceptual understanding and this approach on these easy questions, you'll see how that solid approach helps you in solving the difficult questions that you are aiming to solve in order to get to that greater than 90 percentile ability. Okay. All right. So let's move on to our next question, but good job here, really good job. This is our next question, and let's first get all of you to select still solving. All right. All right, last 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Now, this is where I have feedback on your conceptual understanding. For those of you who selected choice D, first of all, choice D is the correct answer. And for those of you who selected choice D, before I gave you a 10-second warning, I would say that you understand this concept decently well. But what I could see is that after I gave that 10-second warning, a number of you started selecting choices other than choice D, A, B, and C. And my feedback to you is, yes, you've gotten the question wrong, but it's probably not because of your approach here. It's you need to understand the conceptual and your conceptual understanding needs to be strong here, and that's why you faltered in this question. So let's look at how should you have solved this question. Now, first of all, tell me what is the equation or what is the formula that is applicable on this question. So write down in the short answer question poll here. It's the divisibility equation. Absolutely right. So you have dividend is equal to divisor times quotient plus remainder. This is the equation that we are applying in this question and in a number of questions that we're going to see. This is your remainder concept. This is your key remainder concept. Okay, so we have dealt with the divisibility concepts. Now we are talking about the remainder concept here. Okay. So essentially what is given to us, this is the conceptual understanding that you need to have. And what is given to us? We are given n leaves a remainder 3 when divided by 204. So we take this given information and we apply our concept there, and then we write down the equation. Now what else is given? What do we need to find out? What is a remainder when n is divided by 4? So we will not, what we have done over here is translated this question statement as well into our conceptual understanding. So n is equal to 4p plus r. Now what do we know about r over here in this equation? In this equation, what is one key thing that we know about r, or that we need to keep in mind regarding r? R is always less than 4. Absolutely right. R need not be greater than 1. It can be 0 as well. The main thing over here is R needs to be less than 4. And where am I getting 4 from? I'm getting 4 from the fact that n is being divided by 4. So your remainder is always less than your divisor. I want you to make a note of that in your scratchpad right now, because this is one constraint that you have to always keep in mind, and we'll be building upon why this constraint is so very important. So we'll be talking about that a whole lot in this session. Okay, so r is always less than 4, is always less than the divisor. In this case, r is less than 4 because 4 is the divisor. So that's what I know about. This is what I have to find out. I need to find out what is the remainder, so I need to find out r. Okay, and I know that r is less than 4. Now what is given to me? I write down the given information as well in terms of my divisibility equation, my remainder equation, right? So this is what it is. Now what is it that I have to do? What is it that you guys did after this step? Now this is where the approach comes about. Okay, so given that what we have done till now is we've translated information from the question into mathematical form. Now what is the next thing that you guys did? Okay, I see I see a correct response here. Okay, I use test cases. Take example of 207 by 204. Okay, all right. Now here is what. So the optimum way over here is write 204 as a product of 4 and other multiples. So very well said. Why am I saying that? Basically, what I have to do is I need to process this information. What I need, if you think about it, this part is given to me. Okay, so let me just show you the solution first. Okay, and then help you visualize why is it that I have done it this way. This part has been given to me. N is equal to 204q plus 3. I somehow need to utilize this equation over here and bring it in the form of this equation so that I can calculate my R. That is my goal. Okay, so I need to visualize this equation in the form of this equation over here so that I can get the value of R. Now, how do I do that? I see N on one side. N over here, we are good here, 204Q, and over here I see 4P. So really what I need is I need to express 204 in terms of multiple of 4, right? So that's what I do. 204 can be written as 4 times 51Q. Now this is exactly in the form of my first term over here. Okay, so what I get is n is equal to 4 into 51Q plus 3. Now I can directly compare this equation with my equation over here, and I can see n compares with n. 4 into 51Q is similar to 4P. That means R is similar to 3. R is same as 3. So R is equal to 3. Okay. Okay, now I see that some of you are using number substitution. You can use that. I'm absolutely fine with that. But again, remember, what is our goal? Our goal is right now, yes, when you are solving this question, your goal is to be able to solve this question correctly. But ultimately, what are we building towards? We are building towards strengthening your conceptual understanding and strengthening your approach to solving these questions so that your ultimate goal is to be able to solve those 700, 750 level questions correctly so that you can capitalize on your strength, that is quant. Okay, that is what our goal is, and that's what we are inching towards. So everything that we do in our preparation material as we are interacting with these easier questions, yes, you can use shortcuts to solve these questions, but these shortcuts are not going to help you solve those difficult problem solving questions, those difficult data sufficiency questions. But if you start to build your approach, if you start to strengthen your concepts, and if you start to utilize these approaches, which are very solid, which are ironclad, even on these easy questions, so if you start to apply that ironclad approach even on these easy questions, you will see as you get to solve those difficult questions, your skill set is going to exponentially improve, and it would give you that comfort level to solve those questions correctly. Is this point clear? Because I know many a times we get these forum queries on our so the way you guys are telling right now, some of you are telling me right now that we can use this shortcut. Absolutely fine. Use the shortcut. But again, remember what the goal of this webinar is. And what your goal is. Your goal is to be able to solve those questions correctly. So you need to be able to build your approach to that solid level such that you don't falter in those while solving those difficult questions correctly. Okay. And one thing that I'll say is different. For verbal, I don't believe you would use those shortcuts a whole lot more once you understand what is required to ace verbal. Okay, because you understand that verbal is your weakness and you need to strengthen that. Okay, so that works positively for all of you in verbal, but that same approach doesn't work positively for you in quant because you have that thing in your mind that, oh, you can solve this question very easily using a shortcut. You can identify these many shortcuts. You feel proud of yourself to be able to determine those shortcuts and solve questions. But ultimately, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not utilizing this question to build your approach to be able to solve those difficult questions correctly. Okay, and I want you guys to understand that part really well. Okay, so that you don't so that whatever questions you solve them with the right kind of aim in mind. Okay, so enough of the lecture. Let's now get to solving the next question that we have over here. Please click on still solving. All right, here you go. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So this question is very similar to the previous question. But what was one thing that you had to do additionally in this question? Let's hear it from you before I show you the solution. Tell me, what was one additional thing that you had to do? Absolutely right. 6 cannot be the remainder. Divide it further. Why can't 6 be the remainder? Because your divisor over here is 5, right? So your remainder has to be less than the divisor. So for those of you who selected choice D, about 13 of you, you made that mistake. So I want, oh, sorry, choice D. Yes, yes. For those of you who selected choice D, you made that mistake. Okay. So take that. Please make a note of this conceptual understanding that you need to ensure that you have. Okay. Understood? Yes, no? All right. So the concept here is the same. Our approach is exactly the same as we did before. We understand what is asked of us. We translate that into this equation, which is based on our concept. Then we take what's given to us. We take a look at these two things very carefully and we see, okay, how can I bring the given equation in the form of the equation which I need as an output? Okay, so we do that, and what we get is that R is equal to 6. Now, this is where we apply our constraint. Okay, so that's a process skill, applying the constraint. So 6 cannot be the remainder, so we need to divide 6 further by 5 to find the remainder, and what we get is remainder as 1. Okay, so if you think about it, there are two process skills that we have applied here. The first one is visualization. Okay, a very, very important process skill, which is what we applied in the previous question as well. The second one is apply constraints. You need to be able to identify constraints in any question that you solve. Okay, I want you to make that note in your scratch pad right now, that whenever you read a question, whether it's problem solving, whether it's data sufficiency, always make a conscious effort to write down, are there any constraints that I need to be aware of, that I need to keep in mind? Okay, write that down. Constraints, question mark, yes, no. Okay, okay, because if you make a conscious effort to identify those constraints right now, it would become an intuitive process for you as you get ready to solve those difficult questions with high accuracy that you need. Okay, so conceptual learning, that R is always less than the divisor. Process learning, always make sure to apply the constraints. Okay, so with this we've come to the end of our warm-up section. So what I would say is, make sure that you keep in mind the feedback that I've given you on your conceptual clarity, and the kind of stuff that we've done in this session. Just taking an example of divisibility and remainders, try to see that the course that you're using, the preparation material that you're using also does that kind of thing, so that you understand whether you are lacking in your concepts or whether you're lacking in your approach to solving questions. And that's what the e-GMAT course does. It gives you feedback first on your conceptual understanding, then it gives you feedback on your approach. Okay, and again, without conceptual understanding, you can't even get to solve questions. So it's important to build your foundation and then move forward in a progressively difficult manner. Okay, all right, so for those of you who weren't able to score 100% in these concepts, I would recommend that you go through the divisibility and remainder module in our number properties course. And again, as I said, GMAT questions require much advanced level of application. And you'll see as we come back to those DS questions 8 through 10, you will see how you will now be able to answer those questions relatively straightforward, in a relatively straightforward manner. Okay. All right. So now let's get to 650 to 700 level problem solving questions. So we'll continue to build upon the concepts that we have learned so far. So let me just get a pulse of the class. How are you guys? You guys are still very much with me in this session, enjoying the session, or is it boring? or what is it right now? Let me hear some more from you, because that way at least I know how I mean, I can see from your performance that you guys are really really into the session. It's really good. And again, guys, one thing that I'll tell you is, please don't get bogged down by the fact that if you're not able to solve questions correctly here, don't get bogged down by it. Okay, again, important thing is, the goal of this session is not to tell you you're not doing good. The goal of this session is to tell you that you have to prepare the right stuff. Now, for some of you, this session may go slow. As I can see, some of you are saying that it's going slow. It could be slightly faster. We will increase the pace. But again, just you're spending so much time in preparing. It's better to essentially just make sure that you're preparing in the right manner. Think of this session as your planning session. Okay, so here comes our next question, and let's see how many choices it has. It has 5 choices. So let me bring about the poll. That has 5 choices. Okay, just let me get still solving here as well. Okay, let's click on still solving, and then we'll be on our way to solve the first question in this category. All right, sounds good. Here's your first question in this category. Okay, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So about 60% of the class got this question correct. The correct answer is choice C. Now let me ask you this. How many of you solved the question by simply solving, by doing the calculations? You did m is equal to 30 times 8.2. You got the value of m, and then you divided that value of m by 15. How many of you solved the question that way? Okay. About 85% of those who are responding to this poll solved it that way. Again, there is nothing wrong in solving the question that way. Okay, but what I would want you to now pay attention to on the screen is, how do you solve this question based on conceptual understanding, based on processing the information, or based on visualizing the information that is given to you. Okay, because again, that's the skill that we are building. Remember, again, I can say it, I will not get tired of saying this again and again. You have to build those process skills. Okay, and the process skill that we are building here is the visualization process skill. Okay, so that's what we are going to focus on. Again, if this question appeared on your in your GMAT exam, if you feel you're confident with your calculations and you don't make mistakes while calculating, you can definitely use calculations to solve this question. But when you're preparing for the test, make sure that you know this process application as well, so that you are building your process skills to be able to solve data sufficiency and difficult PS questions. Okay, so here's what we do. Same concept. What is required of us is to find the remainder when m is divided by 15, and what's the constraint here? R is less than 15. Okay, so nothing fancy here. What's given to us is m divided by 30 is equal to 8.2. So I simply move 30 from my left hand side into my right hand side, and I get m is equal to 30 times 8.2. Now, this is the equation that's given to me, and this is what I need to get it in the form of in order for me to calculate the remainder. So what do? What I do is I process this information. I visualize this a bit. What I do is I apply my multiplicative property here. M is equal to 30 times 8 plus 30 times 0.2. How many of you are absolutely clear about how I did this? Because if you are absolutely clear, I don't need to go into the details of it. Okay. So all I'm doing is, what is 8? 8 is 8 plus 0.2. So all I've done is 30 times 8 plus 30 times 0.2. Okay. So for those of you who are having problems understanding that, you can please post a question in the Q&A pod, and Ashutosh would be able to help you out there. Okay. So now what I do is, think about this. I have two terms. One is 30 times 8. The other is 30 times 0.2. And over here also I have two terms, but I need one of the terms in the form of multiple of 15. So I try to express this number in terms of multiple of 15. What I get is 30 is equal to, I can write 30 times 8 as 15 times 2 times 8, right? So I have gotten my first term in the form of multiple of 15, and I calculated 30 times 0.2, and that is 6. So my remainder is 6. Okay, so that's the correct answer. Everyone clear about this? Okay, good. So now let's solve our next question. Next question is very similar to this one. So I would urge all of you to solve this question, the next question, in the form that we're using the same process of visualizing, taking care of constraints. Okay, so do not solve it by doing calculations. I know you all can, but don't solve it by using calculations. Okay, so let's get to the next question. Click on still solving, please. Okay, here you go. Okay, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So I can tell that there are some people who are struggling with these questions. Again, don't get bogged down by it. Just follow through the solutions. Once we end this session, you'll be getting the session recording. Take a look at that. Take a look at the presentation as well. Solve these questions again, and I'm sure you'll be able to get it. Okay. So in this question, again, same thing. We write m is equal to 30p plus r, and r is less than 30. Okay, and m is equal to 15 times 8 into 2. Now in this case, what is the visualize? So how do I need to express these terms? I need to get them in the form of 30 in the form of multiple of 30. So how do I do that? I simply do m is equal to 15 times 8. I can write that as 15 times 2 times 4. So that is equal to 30 times 4 plus 3. So my remainder is 3. So again, very similar question to what we did earlier. Almost exactly the same. Okay, we just changed certain numbers here. Okay, so let's now move on to our next question, question number 3. So let's click on still solving, please. Actually, let me ask this question. How many of you were able to solve this question using this process, the visualization process? Good. So continue doing that. Okay, let's not do any calculations. Okay, I mean, let's not do any lengthy calculations. We do need to calculate here, but not the lengthy ones. Okay, so here's question number 3. Go ahead. Last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So this question didn't have as good a performance as the previous question did, and there was slightly more processing that was required here. Okay, so same thing. I need to visualize the information. Now, what do I need to do over here? I need to process these terms over here such that I get at least one term with 30 as as a factor. Okay, so let's start doing that. M is equal to 15 times. I can write 9 as 8 plus 1. Okay. Now I open it up. Now I know that 15 times 1 is not going to give me 30 at all, right? So I need to split these terms. 15 times 8 plus 15 times 1 plus 3. Everyone with me till this point? Yes, no? Okay, good. Now what I do is 15 times 8 I can write as 15 times 2 times 4. So this becomes my term with 30 in it. And then I have 15 times 1 plus 3. So I simply simplify this. 15 times 1 plus 3 is equal to 18. So the correct answer here is, so what I get my equation as is 30 times 4 plus 18. So the remainder is 18, and that's why the correct answer is choice E. Okay. Now for those of you who selected choice B as the correct answer, you did not process this information properly. There was a term with 15 that came out of this information as well. So you did not process that. Okay. So I don't know, it was a silly mistake from your side, or you were just speeding up to solve the question. So again, be very careful that as you're applying this, so what you did over here was you knew the concept well, you knew the process skill well, but you didn't go through the application of that process skill very well. Okay, so I want you to be careful from that perspective. All right, so with this we've come to the end of this section as well. If you think about it, we are simply applying the same concept, but we are progressively increasing the degree of application in these in these three questions. Okay, the first one was relatively straightforward. The second one required certain level of processing. Third one required a little bit more processing. So you can simply see that the level of processing is increasing as we went from question number 1 to question number 3 in this section. So what is the takeaway over here? The takeaway is that as you are solving questions, as you are learning your quant, as you're doing quant preparation, make sure that you know the concepts well, apply the process, and get this kind of feedback from the preparation material that you have, such that you know what are you doing right and what are you not doing right. Okay. Now I have a question here. Is the time you're giving us to solve these questions the same time we should be going for when in the real GMAT exam? Not at all. My goal over here is not to prepare you for test readiness. Okay, that's not the goal of this webinar. For test readiness perspective, we have our quant workshops, which I would urge you to attend once you feel that you are at a certain level that you want to be at in quant. The goal of this session is to tell you how to prepare for quant. So right now I'm giving you as much time as you need to solve the question. Again, the class is pacing. You guys are actually pacing the session here. Okay. All right, so now let's come to our next section in which we're going to be solving 700 level problem solving questions. But before we get to that point, I want to build upon the concept of dividend is equal to divisor times quotient plus remainder. I want to give you some more information so that you can solve difficult questions with ease. Okay, so I'm going to be teaching, the next few slides are going to be a little bit conceptual in nature. In fact, the next 2 slides. Okay, so let's go through that. We'll go through this relatively quickly because I think you would be comfortable with this. What is the remainder when 31 plus 43 is divided by 7? What is going to be your approach to solve this question? How will you solve this question? Add and then divide. Yes, add and then divide. Or what you can do is you can either add and then divide. This is what sequence 1. Or what you can do is you can divide independently because these are smaller numbers when you divide them independently, and then you add the 2 remainders. Okay, so you can do any of the 2 sequences. All right, so use your judgment. Right, for larger numbers, sequence 2 is better because if the individual numbers are larger, then if you add them up, you'll get to a larger number than the individual numbers. But for small numbers, sequence 1 is better. So no second thoughts about that. Okay, but the key thing over here is that you can add the 2 remainders. You can divide and then you can add the 2 remainders if you have to find the remainder of the addition with the okay. So that's the main thing that you need to know. But always keep in mind that that the remainder has to be less than the divisor. So in this case, if remainder that we got as 4, let's say we got the remainder as 8, then we should have processed 8 further because 8 is greater than 7 and your remainder cannot be greater than 7. So your constraints still remain the same. Okay, but this is just if you're given an addition thing, you can actually add remainders. That's what this tells. The same thing is applicable if you are given a product. Okay, so you can either apply sequence 1. Now in sequence 1 you will get a pretty large number to multiply to divide, but if you follow sequence number 2, then you can simply divide the individual numbers and then you multiply the 2 remainders. Okay, so clearly sequence 2 is more efficient. How many of you were aware of this concept? So about 60% of the class was aware, about half of the class was aware of this concept. Okay, so for those of you who were not aware of this concept, I hope that this is now clear. You can add remainders, you can multiply remainders, but again, keep in mind that the constraint is always applicable. Okay, so let's quickly go through this now. That's what we did here. So this slide is simply explaining why is it that we are saying that we can add remainders. So I'd like you to go through this slide at your own pace after the session is over. Okay, so this just tells you why am I saying that I'm actually proving that you can add remainders. okay, or you can multiply remainders. So it's really for your conceptual clarity that why is it that you can add and multiply remainders. Okay, so go through this slide at your own convenience after the session. Now let's start applying. Okay, so here's your question. I'm going to reopen it. Can you please click on still solving? Okay, go ahead and start. Last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so look at the question over here. 24 times raised to the power 3 times 38 raised to the power 5 is divided by 3. Now tell me, just looking at this thing without doing any calculations, do you think this number is completely divisible by 3? Yes, this number is completely divisible by 3 because 24 is completely divisible by 3. So regardless of whatever is the remainder with 38, it doesn't really matter because 24 is completely divisible by 3. So this entire expression is completely divisible by 3. So the remainder is 0. Okay. Now, if you look at your responses, so how many of you did the question in this manner? You observed the numbers that 24 is completely divisible by 3. Okay, so for those of you who observed these numbers without getting into it and solve this question without getting into any calculations, good. For those of you who did not, this is where reading the question statement clearly really helps. Okay, don't get into just because I've told you that you can multiply remainders or you can add remainders doesn't mean that you will start to blindly apply that. See if you need to apply that. It's all about what kind of processing is required on the question. Okay, again, it is not about the conceptual understanding that you guys don't have. You have the right conceptual understanding to solve this question. It is, are you spending enough time on the question statement just to observe and make certain inferences? So over here, the process skill that was applicable was drawing inferences. One thing that I want to basically tell everyone is GMAT is a test. GMAT is a very logical test. They don't want to know how brilliant you are in doing calculations or how brilliant you are in solving those tricky questions. No, what they want to know is, are you logical? Are you methodical? Do you spend the time in observing? Do you spend the time in inferring information? Okay, so in this case, if you simply observe this, you'll see 24 is divisible by 3, right? So even if 38 is not divisible by 3, this entire number is going to give a remainder of 0. Okay. All right. So this question remainder is 0. So stick to your basic conceptual understanding. Now let's look at question number 2. Okay. What is a remainder when 25 times 38 whole raised to the power 3 is divided by 3? And let me give you a hint. In this case, neither 25 nor 38 is divisible by 3 completely. So in this case, it's much better for you to apply the multiplication of remainder concept. Okay, so go ahead and start solving this question now. Okay, I apologize, I was broadcasting the results. So, but I'm hoping that all of you got this question right for the right reason. So let's go through the solution here. So what I have to do over here is I have to find the remainder when this expression is divided by 3. Now what is this expression? This expression is simply 25 times 38, 25 times 38 times 25 times 38. So what I can do is I can calculate remainder for each of these 6 terms and then I can multiply them. Now obviously remainder of like terms will be the same. So what I can simply do is I can find the remainder with 25, I can find remainder with 38, and then I can multiply the 2 and then I can raise the whole thing to the power 3. Okay. So again, either which way works. So you can either put what you'll notice is if you consider these as separate terms, you take remainder for each and every term. Whatever processing you do will come out to be the same processing as over here, and I want you to do that on your own when you're solving the question after the session. Okay, so 25 times 3, remainder is 1. 38 times 3, remainder is 2. So which means 2 times 2 is 2. So 2 raised to the power 3. So you get 8 as the remainder. But remainder cannot be less than 3. So you need to apply a process skill of applying constraints. So what you get as remainder is 2. So the correct answer here is choice C. All right. Do you guys see how the process is being applied here in a progressively difficult on questions that are getting progressively difficult? Okay. Do you guys appreciate the application of the processes? Okay, because that's very important. That's my goal. I want you guys to take one thing that I want you guys to take, even if you get to take away, even if you take away just one thing from the session, I would be happy. And that takeaway should be that I need to have a solid approach. I need to follow these process skills. I need to build my ability in these process skills. Now, what you'll notice is in these questions, calculations have been simplified extensively, right? You don't really need to, GMAT is not a test of how well you can calculate. Okay, frankly speaking, you're going to have calculators. You have your calculators on your phones everywhere. So that is not the skill that the GMAT is testing you on. It's testing you on drawing inferences, in simplifying information. Okay, so that's what you need to focus on. Those are the skills that you need to build. Okay, now the next concept over here is the concept of negative remainders. How many of you are aware of the concept of negative remainders? Okay, so about half of the classes or less than half of the classes. Okay, so don't worry, we'll go through this. The whole thing with negative remainders is the way we talked about adding remainders and multiplying remainders. The whole purpose of that was to simplify the calculations. Okay, and those things, and again, these things are not tricks. These are based on solid concepts. Okay, so you can call these as corollaries of your basic concept of dividend of your remainder equation. Okay, so negative remainders are used again to simplify calculations, and these are applicable in certain cases, and we'll be talking about those cases now. Okay, but the key thing over here is your answer. So the constraint that we spoke about, that r should be less than the should be less than the divisor, and r should always be positive. Okay, r remainder can never be a negative remainder in terms of your final answer that you put in. Okay, the negative remainders that we are talking about are really intermediate processing that you can do in order to make your final calculations easy. Okay, but your answer to the final question is your final answer is never going to be negative. Okay, is this point clear? Yes or no? So we are introducing the concept of negative remainders just to make sure that you can do processing comfortably. Okay, so let's take a look at it. So r is always less than the divisor, r is always greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so those are the two constraints that are always applicable. So now let's consider, what do I mean by negative remainders? Let's say I take up a number 5 and I divide that by 2. Remainder is always 1, right? Why is that? Because I can write 5 is equal to 2 times 2, which is 4 plus 1. Okay, likewise, let's take a number 8. 8 divided by 3, remainder is 2. Why is that? Because I can simply take 8 as 3 times 2 plus 2. Now in this case, remainder is 1. In this case, remainder is 2. Now what if I write this equation not in this term, but I write this equation in this form. 5 is equal to 2 times 3, which is 6 minus 1, right? So in this case, my equation is going to be relatively straightforward, but I'm just changing the way I have written it. Okay. Likewise, I can write 8 as 8 is equal to 3 times 3 minus 1. Okay. Now in this case, what you see is my remainder is a negative number. Here also my remainder is a negative number. Okay. These are what I called as negative remainders. Okay. But as I said, before we mark the correct answer, we always have to convert our remainders into positive remainders. Okay. So we always need to apply constraints. And how do I do that? I basically add and subtract the divisor. Okay, I rearrange terms, and ultimately what I get is if I simply add back the divisor, I can convert my negative remainder into positive remainder. Okay, so I know that I've rushed through this part over here. Frankly, this is just a derivation, so I would really want you guys to take a look at this at your own convenience after the session. Go through this step by step as to why I've done this. But the key thing for this session and for the sake of time that I want you to remember is that positive remainder is equal to negative remainder plus the divisor. Okay, because this is required, this processing is required for you to mark your final answer. Okay, that's one thing that I want you to keep in mind. The second thing that I want you to keep in mind is just recognize that if you can express your divisibility equation such that you get a -1 as remainder, specifically -1 because that can ease your calculations a whole lot, or if your negative remainder can be a smaller integral value as compared to your positive remainder, you can see that you can do that, and that's going to simplify your calculations. Okay, is this point clear? Yes or no? Okay, again, as I said, please, after the session, once I share the PDF with you, once you get the recording, go back to the slide over here and make sure that you understand how I have arrived at this point. Okay, make sure that you do that. All right, so now let's apply this equation, this whole concept. So I'm going to solve this question for you. And then question number 7, I would want you guys to do on your own. Okay, so let me solve this question right now first. So what are we doing here? Here, we have been given this expression, and how many of you get scared of looking at such expressions? You look at these powers and you think, oh my goodness, so much calculation is required. But frankly speaking, you don't need that kind of calculations, though, right? All you have to do is observe, go back into your concept repository, get the right concept, and then apply those concepts using your process skills. Okay, so I need to find remainder of this expression when it's divided by 3. Now let me apply my concept of adding and multiplying remainders. So what do I get? I get 24 times 38. I divide that by 3. I get that remainder. And then 17 divided by 3, I get that remainder. Now I already know, just by observing, I can draw an inference that the remainder of this expression is going to be 0 because 24 is completely divisible by 3. So there's not going to be any remainder left. Okay, which means I am left with 17 divided by 3. So I need to find that remainder. Now how can I write 17? I can write 17 as 3 times 6 minus 1. 3 times 6 is 18, 18 minus 1. Okay, so now I get -1 as the remainder over here. Now what I have to do is I've gotten remainder of 17 by 3, right? So all I have to do is raise -1 to the power 7. And what is that? That is -1. So my remainder is -1. Now can the remainder ever be a negative number? Yes or no? Remainder can never be a negative number. So what do I do to convert this into a positive number? I add back the divisor. My divisor is 3. So -1 plus 3 is equal to 2. Okay, so my final answer here is 2. So the correct answer here is choice D. Okay, remainder is 0 plus 2, which is 2. Now, here what I did was I used negative remainders. Okay, I used the concept of negative remainders. Now, had I used my regular positive remainder concept or regular remainder equation, I would have gotten 2 over here as the remainder. And then I would have had to do 2 raised to the power 7. I would have had to calculate that, and then I would have to divide that by 3 again to find the remainder. A lot more calculation intensive process. Versus over here, because I can process this as a -1 remainder, I can, and now whenever powers are involved, all I have to take care of is the sign of the number. That's it. So negative remainders are very much applicable, can make our processing calculations a lot easier, especially if we can get -1 as the remainder. So again, this is where you have to draw inferences. You have to look at the number 17 divided by 3. Can I process it in the manner that I can get a -1 there as a remainder, right? So you are applying your solid concepts. It's just that the application is a bit more complex. Okay, the application is a bit more involved over here. Okay, so I have a question: how 17 raised to the power 7 became 17 only? Again, we are just applying the concept that we read earlier, that we learned earlier, that if you calculate 17 divided by 3, remainder of that, you can calculate that remainder and then raise that to the power 7, which is what we are doing over here to calculate the remainder of this term. Okay, so again, we are just simply applying that process here. Okay, and again, guys, I'm telling you, go back to this presentation after the session and look through these slides. You will get a lot more clarity. Okay. All right. So how many of you can see the application of negative remainder in order to ease your calculations? How many of you can see that? And again, these are not tricks. These are solid conceptual based understanding. There's derivation of each and every adding remainders, there is a derivation. Multiplying remainder, there is a derivation. Negative remainders, there is a derivation. Okay, so these are just some high level derivations of your basic concepts, and that's what is required for you to solve difficult questions. Okay. All right, so now let's solve question number 7. I want you to solve this question on your own. There's slight difference in this question. It's divided by 6, so the divisor has changed now. The expression inside remains the same. So go ahead, click on still solving, please. Okay, go ahead and solve this question. All right. Wow, this is absolutely amazing. Okay, can you all put in your answers again? For some reason, it just got erased. This was a beauty to marvel. 93% of the class got this question correct. So absolutely amazing. So how do you guys feel? I mean, are you getting the hang of the process here? Are you seeing how progressively the questions are getting difficult? But in terms of solving them, they are pretty straightforward, right? If you understand the concepts well. Okay. All right. Once you understand everything, absolutely right. Had I given you this question up front in the session, you wouldn't have been able to solve this question with this level of accuracy. Okay. So the thing over here is you need to understand that questions by themselves are not really that very difficult. What you have to make sure is that you are building up your ability to be able to solve those questions correctly. Okay. Now the question is, should we ensure this for -1 only? It's see, for me, the smaller the number that I have to process, the better it is, right? In this case, I'm getting, so if the choice was between 5 and -2, I would select -2. Definitely -1 makes my job a lot more easy because there is no calculation at all to be done. And most likely, again, I don't quote me on it. Given that GMAT is not really there to check your calculation prowess, you are going to get questions that you can simplify using negative remainders to get -1. Okay, the numbers will be chosen in that manner. But again, don't quote me on that. I'm saying that I'm drawing that only as an inference that GMAT is not about testing your calculation prowess. Okay, it is really to test how you draw inferences, how do you apply the processes. Okay, all right. So let's now move on to our GMAT to our questions on 700 level, the DS questions. Okay. So we'll come back to our DS questions. Let's go back. But one thing that I would definitely recommend is for sections through questions 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, definitely go through the presentation again to make sure that you get the logic behind each of these manipulations. Okay, make sure that you do that. Now let's come back to data sufficiency questions. Now, do you guys feel, and I want you to give me your subjective response, the 3 questions that you solved up front, data sufficiency questions, do you want to take another stab at solving those questions and see if you can apply the process that you've learned here? Okay, so my thing is, make a note of, so these are the things that I want to absolutely make sure you do. Understand the question statement properly. Okay, make a note of everything that's given in the question statement, including the constraints. Okay, then you basically process information one thing at a time, one information at a time. Okay, make sure that you give it enough time. Okay, all right, so let's move on to our first question. Here you go. Let's click on still solving first so that I know how many of you are solving it. Click on still solving, please. All right, go ahead. Okay, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Absolutely amazing. I can see that your performance has improved considerably. It's still not there where I want it to be, but it is really improved a lot. So what changed? What has changed? Conceptual clarity on using remainders with powers, the approach. Absolutely right. Very nice. I'm so happy to see that. And understood fundamentals. Okay. Just by observing, we can solve now. Absolutely right. And that is the power of building your conceptual understanding, of having focus on the process. If you think about this, if you continue to using numbers to substituting numbers, you won't build up this level of clarity, this level of confidence to be able to solve such questions. You won't even build up your process skills to be able to solve these questions. Okay, so all right, so let's go through. So again, I'm very, very happy to see your performance. So the accuracy of this question earlier was 22%. So only 22% of people selected choice A. Now that has increased to 53%, and that's really good. Now I know there are a few students who have still selected choice C, which is okay. As long as you guys can understand where you made a mistake, that would be a success for all of us. Okay, so let's go through this. Question statement analysis, we have to find the remainder when P is divided by M and M is greater than 1. Statement 1 analysis, P is equal to M plus 1 raised to the power 8. Now, this is an equation given to us, right? Now, one thing that people who have selected choice C, what they have done is they saw, okay, here from choice 1, from statement 1, I'm getting a linkage between P and M. From choice 2, I'm getting the value of M. So I can simply utilize these two equations and I can find my answer. Okay, is this what all of those who selected choice C thought about? Because that's purely from the surface of it, right? And believe me, if you see a DS question in which you can simply draw such inferences, you can tell that, okay, if your question is right, if your approach is right, then that means you're solving easy questions right now, because no DS question of 700 level plus level would simply require this level of processing, not at all. Okay, so that's kind of a clue for you. Okay, so anyways, so let's come over here and look at statement number 1. P is equal to M plus 1 raised to the power 8. Right, so what I have to do is I have to find P remainder M. So what do? I say, okay, P divided by M, so I divide that on both the sides. Okay, now M plus 1 divided by M. So what I can do is I can simply simplify this by saying, let me find the remainder when M plus 1 is divided by M, and then I can raise that remainder to the power 8 and get to my final answer. Okay, so M plus 1 divided by M, yes, you're working with variables here, but apply your conceptual understanding. You divide, the remainder over here is clearly going to be 1. Okay, so 1 raised to the power 8 and you get 1 as the answer. Very simple. So even though you have two variables over here, the thing is, what is it that you need to find out? You need to find out the remainder when P is divided by M. So what you're required to do is visualization. You need to do that level of processing over here. Okay, and as you build those process skills while solving easier questions, when you get to this level, you will be able to solve such questions. Okay. If the power of M plus 1 were 7, then also the answer will be A. Definitely yes, because M plus 1 raised to the power 7, 1 raised to the power 7, it would still be 1. Okay. All right. So statement 1 is sufficient. So which means that your potential answer could be A or D. Now let's look at statement 2. M is equal to 8. Now M is equal to 8 doesn't tell you anything about what is P. Okay, so statement 2 is not sufficient, which means the correct answer is A. Okay, so I have a comment here. I chose the correct answer earlier, but not for the correct reason. So the webinar helped greatly. Definitely, yes. It's very important, and I'm glad that you're making those observations in your thought process on your own. It's not just important to select the correct answer. You need to be able to select the correct answer for the right reasons. And I want you guys to get in that habit of questioning yourself, of being, you can be your own, you need to be your own severe critique. Okay, so look at it. When you solve questions, you basically look at this. Did you solve the question in the right manner? Did you get to the correct answer for the right reasons? Okay, that's very, very important. All right. So now let's take a look at question number 9. Let's go back and see how well you do here. Can you please click on still solving? All right, go ahead. All right, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So, how was your experience with this question? Your performance has definitely improved. That goes without saying. Because if I compare it, so the correct answer here is choice. Okay, let me first hear from you. How was your experience with this question? How do you guys feel? Little confusing, much clearer, good, okay, partly okay. This was comparatively difficult, insecure, okay. Negative remainders is game changing, confused with second statement. Okay, I felt none of the statements made any difference. Okay, all right, good. Thank you for being so honest here. So I would say, so the correct answer here is choice A. Now, for those of you who selected choice A, were you confident in your selection? Okay, so 28 of you selected choice A. How many of you were confident? Okay. All right, so quite a few of you were confident. Good, very nice. So this has really improved. Earlier, only about 20 people selected choice A. And then choice C was a pretty close contender. About 21 people selected choice C. So this time, the emphasis from choice C has gone down, which is good. But now more people started selecting choice D, thinking that each statement individually is sufficient. So, which means there is a slight conceptual gap that we have to, not a slight small process change that we have to do, process enhancement that we have to do for choice for statement number 2 processing. Okay, so let's look at this now. So statement 1. First of all, question statement analysis. What is it that we have to find out? We have to find out remainder when 38 raised to the power n square is divided by 13. Now, when you take a look at this, 38 raised divided by 13 raised to the power n square, the process skill that you have to apply here is visualize and apply the correct concept. Now you can simply take 38 divided by 13, find the remainder of that. Now what is the remainder of that? The remainder is minus 1. Actually, over here you use the negative remainder concept, because if you simply take the remainder the normal way, you'll get plus 12, right? And processing 12 with the powers and variables involved is going to be a nightmare. Okay, so you process it with negative remainder minus 1. Okay, so again, that's the inference that you are drawing. You are aware of the concept of negative remainders, but you're drawing that inference that in this case, I can actually utilize my negative remainder concept, because that's going to simplify my processing, simplify the processing that I need to do. Okay, so again, very, very logical. Now what you get is minus 1 raised to the power n square. So now what is, if you have to find out the remainder, what are the possibilities that can come out of minus 1 raised to the power n square? What are the possibilities? Tell me. There are two possibilities. Yes, it's either 1 or minus 1, depending upon whether n is odd or even. Absolutely right, whether n is odd or even. So if n is odd, then the remainder is going to be minus 1, and then you process it further and you get minus 1 plus 13, and 12 is going to be the remainder. If n is even, then the remainder is going to be minus 1 straightforward. Okay, so really speaking, you have, what we are doing over here is we are not simply taking the question statement at its face value and proceeding on with the answer, with the statement analysis, individual statement analysis. We are doing as much processing as we can. We are summarizing we are doing as much, simplifying everything as much as we can. And then we see, okay, what is the actual question that I need to get answered from the two statements that I have? The actual question is the even odd nature of n. Right? The actual question that I need to get answered is not what is the remainder when this complex expression is divided by this large number 13. The actual question that I need to get answered is what is the even odd nature of n? Is n odd or is n even? If any of my statements can give me that answer, then I know that I can solve this question, that I can answer the question that is asked in the question statement. Okay, so this is another process skill that is very, very applicable in data sufficiency questions, to simplify the question statement to as much degree as you can before you start taking a look at the individual statements. Okay, is this thing clear? I want you to make a note of that in your scratch pad right now. Okay. Okay. Now statement 1. N is equal to, n leaves no remainder when divided by 4, which is very clear, which implies that n is even, so it clearly answers my question. Okay, so well and good. Let's look at statement 2. Square root of n is only divisible by 1 and itself. Now this is the concept that I have to apply. I have to read the statement. I have to understand what is the statement actually telling me. All this is telling me is that square root of n is a prime number, which means that n is square of prime number. Okay, now what all prime numbers exist? 2, 3, 5, 7, and so on. Now what is the main thing about this? 2 is the only even prime number. So really speaking, this statement doesn't tell me whether n is odd or even. It leaves me open. Okay, 2 is also an even number. Right, so which means that statement 2 is not sufficient, which means that choice A is the correct answer. For those of you who selected choice D as the correct answer, did not consider the conceptual aspect that 2 is also an even prime number. 2 is the only even prime number, not 2 is also an even prime number. 2 is the only even prime number. Okay, so now tell me, okay, let's now solve question number 10 as well, and then I'm going to ask you a certain question. Okay, let's click on still solving. All right, go ahead, solve the question. All right, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So how was this question? Experience with this one? Not good experience, very difficult. Okay, all right. Well, I would say one thing. Okay, so for those of you who've selected choice D, D is the correct answer here. So for those of you who've selected choice D, were you confident of your selection? Okay, the confidence level is not very high for this question. Okay, never mind. Let's go through so we'll go through the solution. But there's one thing that has actually changed between the two attempts. So the poll on the bottom is your previous attempt. The poll on the top is your current attempt. If you notice, a number of you had selected choice, quite a few of you had selected choice C, choice B, and choice A earlier. Now that number has reduced slightly. Not that many people have selected choice C, not that many. So the level of confidence, there has been some shift in how you are processing the information, and that is good. As I said, magic is not going to happen. But the thing is, there is that realization that you need to do it in a step-by-step manner. So that realization is stronger now. Okay. So as you can see, about 30% of students selected choice D, and now 52% of students have selected choice D as the correct answer. So there's definitely some movement there. Even people who have selected wrong answers, they're also selecting answers in a much more methodical manner, I feel. Okay, so again, I'm just drawing certain inferences based on how you guys are reacting to the question. But let's go through the question in detail and figure out where you faltered or why did you find this more difficult. So we need to find the remainder when 4m is divided by 16, where m is a positive integer greater than 1. Okay, so I simply write this information down and I write down my constraints. Okay, so 4m is equal to 16q plus r. So far so good, yes? So there isn't much that I can extract from the question statement itself. All I have to do is find out the remainder when 4m is divided by 16, right? Okay, so now what is given from statement 1? Statement 1 gives me this information about remainders and divisors. So I write that information down in terms of my remainder equation. Okay. Now what I do is, what do I have to do? I have to apply my visualization skill. I need to somehow bring this equation in the form of this equation so that I can get the remainder. That is what I need to do, right? So this is where you are applying your processing skill. This is where, when initially you were solving it by simply calculating the answer, I said don't do that. Get in the habit of processing information, and that's the skill that you're applying here. So look at how I do it over here. I multiply both sides by 4, okay, and I bring it in the form that's needed. 4m is equal to 4 times this expression over here. Okay, now I process each term. My goal is to get 16 as a multiple. So I need to get a multiple of 16 as one term, and then I need to get one term which doesn't have any variable, so that I can get to my r. So that's the process. That's the processing that I need to do. And when I do that, what I get is this number. The first term is 16, so which means I get 8 into 32 to the power 31 as p, and then I get 4 times 4 as 16. So what I get is remainder is 0. How many of you are able to follow along this? You may not have been able to do it exactly this way yourself, but now that you see the processing here, how many of you feel that, okay, you can do this kind of processing? Frankly, there isn't much that's going on here. The only thing that you have to start working on is manipulating these expressions. Okay, understanding what it is that you need. Your goal of manipulation is to get this equation in the form of this equation. That's your goal, understanding that. And then as you start working through it, be patient and go through each and every part of the expression one by one. That's all that's needed. Then you get to the answer. Okay, so statement A is statement 1 is sufficient, which means your potential choices are A and D. Now let's take a look at statement 2. Statement 2 says that m raised to the power 3 is divisible by 16. Okay, now this statement is a bit tricky. Okay, and again, the comfort level to solve this kind of statement will definitely, you will get a lot more comfortable as you solve easier questions that are based on this, and that's what you get in the e-GMAT course. In the e-GMAT course, we start off from simple questions that build your ability up to this level. Okay, so let's take a look at this. What has been given? M cube is divisible by 16. Okay, so now if it's divisible by 16, what I can definitely tell is that m is an even number, right? M is definitely an even number. If m cube is divisible by 16, which means that m is definitely an even number. So I can write down m in terms of prime factors as follows. Okay, I don't know about the other prime factors, but I definitely know that 2 is a prime factor because m is even number. Now what I do is I cube both sides. Essentially what I need to know is, frankly speaking, from statement 2, what I really need to know is that how can I process m so that I can figure out if 4m is divided by 16, what is the remainder, right? So that's what I need to know. Okay, so I cube both sides. And then what I get is m cube is equal to 2 to the power 3a times this whole thing. Okay, now I know that m cube is divisible by 16. So what does that mean? What that means is that this 3a is greater than or equal to 4. Why? Because 16 is equal to 2 to the power 4. So from here, I get my constraint that minimum that A can be is 2, which means that M is equal to 2 squared something. Okay, which means that 4M will be equal to 4 into 2 squared into something, which means that 4M is equal to 16Q, which means that if 4M is divided by 16, then the remainder is 0. Okay, so again, there is no complex calculations that are happening. What's happening is drawing inferences. Okay, again, this this part of the question statement is not something, this part of the statement analysis is not something, the skill that is required for this is another process skill which you need to build up. And again, it's just manipulating information. That's about it. It's just what information is given to you, how do you process that information? And if you think about it, there is this concept of prime factorization that is applicable here. Okay, so all right, so with this, we've come to the end of this section as well. Okay, the key thing over here is, okay, that once you build your solid concepts, once you build that solid foundation, once you build the right kind of process skills, GMAT Quant is definitely something that you can master. You can improve from a low quant score if you focus on learning. Okay, don't focus on shortcuts, don't focus on tricks. Focus on solid conceptual, solid process-based learning, and that's what the e-GMAT Quant course really builds upon. Okay, it teaches you concepts, it teaches you application. The way we have selected application questions in the application files and in the practice files, they build your conceptual understanding and your application aspect in this manner, in this progressively difficult manner. As you solve those easier questions correctly, using the right approach, using the right process skills, you will definitely be able to solve those difficult questions correctly. Okay, with the right level of confidence. Okay, now at this point in time, I want to share certain success stories so that you see how other people have utilized this very approach and have been able to do so well in quant. And the first success story is for people who believe that they are really good in GMAT Quant. Okay, and you should definitely look at Krish's verified review on GMAT Club. Krish had always done well in quant, but he was stumped by the GMAT Quant. He constantly faltered while answering GMAT questions, falling in familiar traps. Frustrated with the lack of progress, he decided to change his approach. He started following a methodical approach, even changing his approach significantly for data sufficiency. And after making these changes, he was able to improve his quant score to Q51, the highest possible, scoring a 740. Okay, let's look at another story now. So Leonardo is he's a South American. He wasn't very comfortable with GMAT Quant, and he was stuck at Q45 despite trying really hard. He needed a high quant score because he wanted to apply to finance focused schools such as NYU Wharton as well as schools such as Tepper. To improve beyond that Q45, Leo adopted a methodical approach, and that's what we've been talking about throughout this webinar. You have to adopt that methodical approach. He started consciously focusing on constraints. Now, that's one of the process skills that we spoke about. Leonardo realized that that process skill was something which he wasn't able to apply very well. So he focused on that very process skill, showing his work on paper. Once he had all of his approaches right, he made extensive use of analytics that Quant Scholaranium provides to isolate the areas that he needed to improve on. Imagine you have a repository of more than 1,000 questions with detailed solutions that are focused on this conceptual feedback, that are focused on these process skills. Okay, the solutions that are, each and every solution is written in the same manner, using the same concepts, using the same process skills across all the quant topics. When you see that kind of approach, you can then utilize those analytics and you can figure out where are you going wrong. Are you not able to infer appropriately in number properties questions? Why is that happening? What kind of conceptual understanding do you not have? You can then ask yourself those questions, and learning becomes a lot more deterministic because now you yourself are in control of your learning path. You're not reliant on anyone else. GMAT taking a mock test that doesn't become that milestone that you have to get to in order to figure out what you need to improve. You utilize Quant Scholarinium platform in order to do that kind of analytics processing so that you figure out what your weak areas are. Okay, and then what Leonardo did was he first figured out what his weak areas were, then he bridged the gap that he identified, and then he took custom quizzing. He utilized the custom quizzing feature to ensure that he had actually improved in the concept that he wanted to improve upon. Okay, now because of his good quant score and excellent verbal score, he was admitted to Wharton, Stern, and Tepper. Now, this third success story is of an individual who was extremely weak in quant. His starting score was Q30, a mere 20 percentile. Okay, he spent a ton of time reading quant books, but he was not able to improve. He benefited from the progressive learning architecture at e-GMAT, in which he was able to cement his basics before taking on difficult questions. That's precisely what we did in this webinar. We took on easier questions. We built our conceptual and our process understanding, and then we were able to solve those difficult questions in a lot better manner. Okay, and in his case, his basics were not strong enough. In his case, when his basics were not strong enough, the system gave him that feedback, and so he was able to incorporate that feedback. Okay, now because of the quizzes that are built into each file, as Rajat was explaining early on, he was able to leverage that data to help him. Okay, Mazibar was able to improve to Q45, which is 59 percentile, and that's a huge improvement from where he started off from. Okay, so again, think about the beauty of it. You figure out what your study plan is. You figure out what are your milestones in quant and verbal, understanding what your relative strengths are, and then you utilize the course regardless of whether you want to get from a 20 percentile to a 60 percentile, or if you want to get from a 40 percentile to a 90 percentile level. The course has everything in it. It's how you utilize the course in order to get to that level. Okay. Now, this another success story is an amazing story of an individual who had an extremely strong determination to study at top B schools. He started at Q38, which coincidentally is 38 percentile on GMAT Quant. He realized that he needed a stellar quant score to get an admit from Wharton and GSB Chicago. And the only way to improve from such low score was to truly focus on learning and building those foundations, okay, which he did using the video lessons. He was short on time, so he used analytics in Quant Scholarinium to isolate the areas where he needed most help. Like Leonardo, he used the custom quiz feature to ensure that he did indeed improve on those topics. Okay, so definitely take a look at his video debrief. So really, to ace GMAT Quant, you need to focus on learning and adopting good habits. Okay, be methodical. Become an active reader of the question statement. Build upon those process skills that are there. Okay, so frankly, in order to conclude, I would say make sure that you have that level of conceptual clarity. Make sure that you solve questions building your process skills. Those are very, very important. Okay, trust the test maker. That's very important. Don't think that he will not throw anything at you that you cannot solve. Okay, the main thing is the GMAT wants to see how logically you approach, how you approach the problem in a logical manner. How do you infer information? How do you simplify information? Believe in your skills. You have everything in your arsenal to be able to solve any of these problems. Okay, as next steps, what I would recommend is take a look at, review all the number properties concept files in the free trial, and that's for people who are not quant customers. For quant customers, go through all the files in number properties. Okay, then maybe come back to this presentation, take a look at the PDF which I'm going to be sharing with you right now. Go through the certain sections of the PDF that I had explained to you earlier, so that you understand how we arrived at these manipulations, addition, adding, multiplying, and a negative remainder. So make sure you understand the logic behind them. Make sure that you solve these questions again, especially the difficult questions, and make sure that you are solving them utilizing the process skills. Okay, and then there are two practice questions as well in this PDF that I'm going to be sharing with you. And then solve number properties questions in Scholaranium. Experience Scholaranium for yourself, right? Again, this is for people. 59 questions are available in the free trial. So definitely take advantage of those. See how well you can identify your gaps, and then see how you can improve upon them. All right. So with this, we've come to the end of this webinar. I'm going to be sharing the presentation with you, and let's talk about, let's hear from you. I've been talking for quite some time. So what I would really recommend is if you could put in your feedback over here, tell me what are your learnings, what did you like about the session, how is this session going to change your approach towards preparing for quant. So let's summarize your findings over here, and then I would also request you to give me your ratings over here. So that would be really nice. I know you guys are tired. It was a grueling 2 hour long conceptual solving questions one after another, but it's always nice to hear from you towards the end. For me, this was really very exciting because I was able to see how well you guys improved from the first set of 3 questions to the same set of 3 questions that you solved towards the end. So it was really very, very good. And again, the purpose of this session is to make sure that you understand how do you prepare for quant in the right manner. I want you to take this, you have this strength in you, and I want you to capitalize on that strength. What really hurts me, well, I wouldn't say it exactly hurts me, because I know people utilize our verbal score, and they go from 20 percentile to 85 percentile, 90 percentile, because they spend that much time. They approach verbal in a very step-by-step manner. But what really hurts me is that they don't feel that it's important enough to focus the same way on quant. Frankly, you need to be able to focus on using this focus the same way on quant as well. After all, you're learning. After all, the test is the same. It's just a different concepts that are tested in quant as compared to in verbal. Okay. Oh yeah, let me share the PDF. Thank you for reminding. Here's the PDF. Okay, so if you have any other questions, you can please put them in the Q&A part. That would be wonderful. So any special ways to deal with DS questions? Really have a bad accuracy with 700 plus DS questions. Anish, you need to follow uh, the same approach that we are using over here. Build your conceptual understanding, build your process understanding, solve the questions that we have in our application files and in our practice files, and you will be able to see how you will be able to improve in your DS questions. Okay. All right. So I think that's it for the session today. I wish you all the very best for your preparation. If you have any other questions, I see there are a few questions here because we are already running short of time. If you could email us those questions, that would be really wonderful. We're going to be responding to each of those questions via email. If need be, we can give you a call as well to answer any of your questions that are not answered in this session. Okay, so that's about it, and good luck. And just make sure, can't emphasize on this enough, just make sure that you prepare for quant in a methodical manner. Okay, that's about it. All right then. Bye bye. And guys, here's the batch calendar for any of you who were not able to download it earlier. All right. Good luck once again.